Hold on. Before you dismiss the decades of erratic radar hits, the sudden radiation spikes, and the impossible electromagnetic interference recorded over the Mesa at Skinwalker Ranch, look at what the ground-penetrating radar units just pulled out of the earth. Because for 28 years, every major investigator to step foot on this 512-acre parcel in northeastern Utah was told the exact same thing. The mystery is in the sky. They were told to look up at the 1.6 gigahertz RF radio signals slicing through the atmosphere, to track the spherical craft disappearing mid-flight above the Triangle region, and to monitor the localized atmospheric distortions that defied every known law of modern geophysics. But late last season, the investigation took a turn that changed everything. The field team, led by Principal Investigator Erik Bard and astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor, brought in heavy-duty seismic tomography sensors and deep-tier ground-penetrating radar arrays. They weren't scanning the airspace. They were firing low-frequency, acoustic, and electromagnetic pulses straight down through the fractured sandstone layers of the Mesa. And what came back on their monitors wasn't a standard, solid bedrock signature. It wasn't the uniform, high-density profile of natural Uinta Basin shale. Instead, the imaging algorithms rendered a long, hollow, artificially geometric void winding deep beneath the hard rock, a subterranean passage running hundreds of feet beneath the surface, lined with high-density materials that reflected radar waves in a pattern no natural geological cavern on Earth produces. For months, the team debated how to reach it without triggering the ranch's infamous defense mechanism. The documented phenomenon where physical drilling or heavy excavation on the property is almost instantly met with sudden medical emergencies, equipment failures, and massive localized radiation spikes. The decision was made to avoid destructive drilling directly overhead. Instead, using historical topographical maps and thermal imagery, they identified a structural collapse along the base of the Mesa, a hidden natural fissure choked under decades of fallen scree and boulder debris. When heavy machinery cleared the entrance, cold air began rushing out of the opening. Not a gentle draft, a continuous, pressurized thermal outflow, registering at an impossible sub-ambient temperature compared to the desert heat outside. The team brought in a specialized, tethered underground exploration vehicle, equipped with high-definition LiDAR, multi-spectrum thermal cameras, and localized Geiger counters. As the unit crawled past the initial rockfall and entered the threshold of the subterranean structure, the live feed streamed back to the command center in real time. The walls were not rough-hewn, jagged, water-eroded limestone. The images displayed a perfectly smooth, slightly arched subterranean passage where the surrounding sandstone appeared to have been vitrified, melted at extreme temperatures into a glass-like ceramic shell. And sitting directly in the center of the passage, resting on a floor, untouched by light or weather for potentially thousands of years, was a cluster of physical evidence that completely blew open the cold case of Skinwalker Ranch. Before the rover could advance another 10 feet, every single monitor in the command truck flashed red. A localized 1.6 gigahertz frequency blast erupted from inside the tunnel, completely frying the vehicle's telemetry relays and leaving the team staring at a frozen frame of something buried deep in the darkness. The telemetry monitors in the command truck didn't just freeze, glitched in a repeating, systematic pattern that directly mirrored the precise signal pulse captured during the infamous 1.6 gigahertz radio frequency bursts in the airspace above the ranch. Inside the command center, the air grew tense. Astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor stared at the static-laced frame locked on the central screen. "That's not a system crash," he noted, leaning closer to the high-definition monitor. "That's an intentional signal override. The rover didn't lose power. It was actively jammed from inside the channel." Before the signal was completely cut, the camera's final high-resolution frame captured an impossible physical anomaly inside the vitrified passage. Sitting motionless on the smooth, glass-like floor was an object that made no sense within the context of standard North American archaeology. It wasn't an ancient indigenous artifact, nor was it discarded mining equipment from the 19th century homesteaders. It was a dense metallic structure, roughly 4 feet tall, shaped like a truncated prism, embedded partially into the vitrified floor. The surface of the metallic module didn't show rust, oxidation, or sediment buildup. It reflected the rover's mounted LEDs with a high luster, brushed titanium sheen, untouched by the subterranean humidity. Surrounding the object were intricate, parallel linear grooves carved directly into the melted sandstone walls. Grooves that extended deeper down the dark corridor, as if the module were merely a junction point for a massive, underground technological network. Outside, at the mouth of the Mesa fissure, the physical field team felt an immediate, terrifying shift in the environment. Field Superintendent Thomas Winterton, standing near the entry trench, raised his handheld radiation monitor. The baseline ambient background reading on the ranch sits at roughly 10 to 15 micro-row engines per hour. Within 3 seconds of the signal jamming, the digital display spiked exponentially. 120, 450, 890 micro-engines per hour. "We've got a massive gamma spike at the opening," Winterton called out through his radio, stepping back from the trench as his skin began to prickle with the distinct, hot sensation of intense localized electromagnetic radiation. It's climbing. Everyone pull back to 30 yards right now." Simultaneously, the team's environmental sensors registered an abrupt, dramatic drop in barometric pressure directly over the fissure, accompanied by a low-frequency infrasound wave, a rumble hovering around 12 Hz, well below the threshold of human hearing, but high enough to cause instant, overwhelming physiological distress. Members of the security team reported sudden, severe vertigo, nausea, and a profound sense of psychological dread, symptoms that matched the historic medical anomalies documented during the NIDS and BSS government study eras on the property. Inside the command truck, Principal Investigator Erik Bard worked frantically to clean up the last buffered frames before the camera cut entirely. Using advanced digital gain and contrast filtering, he isolated the area directly behind the metallic prism object. As the noise cleared from the image, a collective silence fell over the room. The passage didn't end 10 feet past the metallic object. It dropped downward at a precise 45-degree angle, extending into a massive, cavernous subterranean vault that stretched far beyond the range of the rover's illumination. And lining the entrance of that lower descent were distinct, repeating structural ribs, evenly spaced archways composed of an unidentified, non-porous composite material that absorbed the rover's light without casting a shadow. "That entire mesa isn't just a geological formation," Erik Bard said, analyzing the structural symmetry on his screen. "It's a shield. Someone, or something, engineered that rock shell to cover what's sitting underneath it." Determined to re-establish contact with the stranded exploration vehicle and secure physical air and soil sample the threshold, the team prepared a hardwired, heavily shielded fiber optic inspection unit. Unlike wireless telemetry, a shielded fiber optic cable could bypass the intense 1.6 GHz RF jamming fields. With full radiation gear and real-time biometric monitors active, 2 team members cautiously reapproached the pressurized cold air rushing out of the fissure. They pushed the fiber optic probe past the threshold, slowly advancing past the vitrified walls toward the metallic prism. The live feed came back up in crystal clear 4K resolution. The probe moved past the prism, angling its lens down into the dark 45-degree slope leading into the massive vault. As the probe's powerful halogen beam sliced through the subterranean gloom, the light struck something deep inside the vault floor that completely changed the scope of the investigation. It wasn't just an empty tunnel. Moving slowly along the far wall of the lower chamber was a distinct luminescent thermal signature, a concentrated, highly organized heat source registering at over 150 degrees Fahrenheit, drifting independently through the subterranean darkness against the flow of sub-zero air. The luminescent thermal signature didn't scatter or dissipate like heated gas. On the high-definition infrared monitor, it maintained a crisp, defined egg-shaped geometry, roughly 3 feet across, gliding 4 inches above the vitrified floor of the lower vault. Inside the command center, Dr. Travis Taylor stared at the heat scale readouts on his secondary screen. "Look at the thermal gradient," he pointed out, tracing the edge of the display. "The ambient temperature inside that chamber is holding steady at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but that heat signature is radiating a sharp 150 degrees with zero thermal transfer into the surrounding air or floor. That defies basic thermodynamics. Energy has to radiate into its environment, unless that anomaly is encased in an impenetrable field." As the fiber optic camera tracked the movement, The thermal orb paused directly beside a secondary metallic structure embedded in the cavern floor. For 5 agonizing seconds, the orb hovered in total silence. Then, without warning, the thermal signature inverted. The bright, high-temperature infrared glow dropped to absolute zero in a fraction of a millisecond, appearing as a solid black void on the thermal camera, before vanishing entirely from the visual spectrum. At that exact instant, the fiber optic cable running down the fissure went dead. It didn't suffer signal degradation or wireless jamming. The physical cable was severed. When the field crew rapidly reeled the line back to the surface to inspect the damage, they found the thick, steel-braided fiber optic line cleanly cut. The edge wasn't frayed, sheared, or crushed by fallen rock. The multi-layered protective sheath, copper shielding, and internal glass fibers were sliced flush, as if sheared by a microscopic precision laser, with the severed tip showing extreme micro-vitrification identical to the tunnel walls. Whatever is down there isn't just passive technology, Field Superintendent Thomas Winterton said, examining the cleanly cut cable end under a magnifying glass. It reacted directly to our camera probe the moment we focused on that lower structure. Refusing to abandon the dive, the team deployed a secondary diagnostic system, a specialized microseismic array, consisting of 6 high-sensitivity geophones pinned directly into the bedrock around the fissure opening. If physical movement or structural mechanisms were operating deep within the mesa, the seismic sensors would capture the acoustic resonance through the hard sandstone. Within minutes of arming the array, the telemetry software began plotting data. But instead of the erratic, jagged spikes typical of natural Earth movements or falling rock, the geophones registered a continuous low-frequency rhythmic pulse radiating from deep beneath the vault. It was a perfectly repeating acoustic signature, a 1.2 Hz rhythmic vibration repeating every 4.2 seconds. Erik Bard ran the acoustic profile through a signal analysis algorithm, comparing it to historical data collected from previous seasons on the ranch. The waveform matched with near 100% mathematical fidelity the mysterious underground seismic hum recorded years earlier during the deep drilling operations at the Triangle area, thousands of feet away. The entire ranch is connected, Bard said, overlaying the subterranean radar maps from previous years with the live seismic data. The anomalies we've been tracking at the Triangle, the strange radar reflections at the homesteads, and this tunnel inside the mesa aren't separate events. They are access points to a single, continuous subterranean complex that spans the entire property. To confirm the extent of the underground structure without risking more equipment down the main fissure, the team brought out an advanced magnetometry rig, a system capable of measuring tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried metallic masses or hollow underground voids. As the magnetometer was towed systematically across the top flat plateau of the mesa, directly above the tunnel trajectory, the incoming data began drawing a massive, 3-dimensional magnetic map of the interior rock mass. The results sent shockwaves through the command trailer. The magnetic survey didn't just reveal a single passage, it mapped a massive wheel-like geometric network, a central subterranean hub situated directly beneath the mesa, with 6 perfectly straight subterranean channels radiating outward like spokes toward the key anomaly hotspots across the ranch. And right at the central hub, 400 feet beneath solid rock, the magnetometer detected an immense concentration of non-magnetic, high-density material, a buried mass so huge it was actively warping the local magnetic north vector around the perimeter of the mesa. The team realized they weren't looking at an isolated underground room or a simple cave. They were standing on top of an ancient, buried system that was actively operating. Determined to see what lay at the end of the descending 45-degree slope, the crew prepared their most ambitious payload yet, a hardened, heavy-duty crawler equipped with independent power, real-time LiDAR mapping, and an internal atmospheric mass spectrometer to analyze the mysterious cold air rushing from the abyss. The heavy-duty crawler, dubbed the Subterranean, was rolled up to the lip of the mesa fissure. Built with all-terrain tread tracks, an onboard localized power source, and a continuous fiber optic tether housed inside an armored titanium sleeve, it was designed to withstand extreme electromagnetic interference. Mounted on its front chassis was a miniaturized atmospheric mass spectrometer, built to analyze every molecule of that pressurized cold air pushing up from the depths. As the crawler clattered over the rough sandstone threshold and entered the vitrified passage, The live environmental readouts flooded onto Dr. Travis Taylor's console. The ambient air pressure inside the shaft was holding at 1.1 atmospheres, meaning the air wasn't just circulating. It was being actively compressed and pushed outward from deep within the system. But it was the atmospheric composition breakdown that made the room go completely quiet. "Look at the noble gas concentrations," Travis said, pointing at the live spectrograph. "Nitrogen and oxygen are at standard baseline, but argon levels are 3 times higher than atmospheric normal. And we're detecting heavy trace amounts of helium-3. Helium-3 is an extraordinarily rare isotope on Earth, virtually absent from the planet's crust but abundant in lunar regolith and deep space. Often cited as the ideal fuel source for advanced, clean nuclear fusion. Finding concentrated trace signatures of helium-3 venting from a subterranean shaft in northeastern Utah was scientifically staggering. The crawler pushed past the metallic prism that had jammed the previous rover. Up close, the camera revealed intricate microscopic patterns etched across its surface. Not decorative symbols but precise, geometric micro-grooves that resembled modern integrated circuit traces on a massive scale. The vehicle reached the edge of the 45-degree decline and began its descent into the lower vault. As the crawler's high-intensity LED matrix illuminated the interior of the cavern, the true scale of the subterranean architecture finally came into focus. The chamber wasn't a natural limestone cave or a rough-hewn mine shaft. It was a massive, octagonal dome spanning over 100 feet in width. The walls were composed of interlocking, hexagonal stone blocks, fitted together with such absolute mathematical precision that not a single grain of sand or drop of moisture had seeped through the joints in millennia. Surrounding the perimeter of the room were 6 large, recessed archways, matching the exact wheel-and-spoke layout mapped earlier by the topside magnetometer survey. "It's a central distribution vault," Erik Bard observed, monitoring the 3D LiDAR point cloud map as it rendered the chamber in real time. "Every single one of those archways aligns perfectly with a major anomaly site on the ranch. One goes to the triangle, one to Homestead 1, one toward the ridge." The crawlers slowly drove into the center of the octagonal room. Resting in the middle of the floor was a raised, circular platform made of a dark, dense composite material that completely absorbed the crawler's laser rangefinder, throwing off the LiDAR sensors. Directly above the platform, suspended from the apex of the dome 4 stories up, was a massive tapered metallic cylinder plate, roughly 20 feet long, pointing straight down at the center of the floor. Suddenly, the mass spectrometer alarm sounded in the command truck. The helium-3 concentration spiked by 400%. Simultaneously, the crawler's onboard magnetometer registered a massive, localized gravitational fluctuation directly beneath the circular platform. The vehicle's internal gyroscopes, designed to keep the camera level, began spinning wildly as the gravitational vector shifted 6 degrees off-axis. Outside, the field crew monitoring the top of the mesa felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. But it wasn't a seismic shockwave. The seismometers recorded 0 horizontal tectonic movement. Instead, it was a vertical harmonic vibration, a smooth, continuous hum that made the air inside their chests resonate. Inside the vault, the suspended metallic cylinder began to glow, not with heat. The thermal cameras showed its surface dropping even lower in temperature, plunging past 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but with a faint violet luminescence radiating along its central axis. The air between the tip of the cylinder and the circular platform began to warp, bending the light behind it like heat ripples on a desert highway. "Pull the crawler back," Travis shouted, eyeing the rising energy signatures on his displays. "The system is powering up." Before the operator could engage the reverse treads, the crawler's optical cameras captured a sudden, impossible visual distortion inside the glowing air gap beneath the cylinder. The solid stone floor at the center of the platform seemed to lose visual density, revealing a translucent, swirling well of light that extended downward into absolute infinity. And then, from inside that bending light, a low-frequency audio tone echoed directly through the crawler's microphone, a rhythmic, intelligent signal pattern that matched the precise mathematical structure of the 1.6 gigahertz radio transmissions captured overhead. The low-frequency audio tone emitting from the light distortion didn't just register on the crawler's microphone. It picked up speed, shifting into a rapid, structured sequence of high-frequency pulses. Inside the command center, Erik Bard immediately isolated the audio feed and ran it through a spectrum analyzer. The live display showed a series of complex, binary-like square waves. That's not random acoustic noise, Bard said, his hands moving quickly across the key desk. It's a structured data packet. The pitch variations correlate perfectly with the frequency modulation steps of the 1.6 GHz signal we track in the sky. The signal in the air isn't coming from space, it's being broadcast outward from this room. Down inside the octagonal vault, the environment around the crawler reached a dangerous tipping point. The light-bending distortion beneath the suspended metallic cylinder expanded outward, encompassing the edge of the circular platform. As the spatial warp touched the front tread of the Subterranean 1, the heavy titanium frame didn't crush or bend. Instead, on the live 4K camera feed, the front 6 inches of the vehicle's steel chassis appeared to visually stretch and fragment, as if being viewed through a high-powered magnifying lens warped by intense gravitational lensing. The crawler's telemetry unit began throwing critical error codes. Its internal clock, synchronized down to the millisecond with the command truck's master server, began desynchronizing. "Look at the timestamp on the lower stream," Travis Taylor exclaimed, pointing to the diagnostic overlay. "The crawler's internal system clock is running 3 seconds slower than our master clock upstairs." Time dilation. "We are measuring localized gravitational time dilation right in the middle of that cavern. According to general relativity, for time to measurably slow down by 3 seconds, within a localized indoor space, the gravitational field strength would need to rival that of a dense celestial object. Yet the physical floor of the Mesa wasn't collapsing into a black hole. The energy was contained, locked within an ultra-precise electromagnetic envelope created by the surrounding hexagonal stone walls and the suspended metallic cylinder. We have to pull that rig back right now, or we lose the telemetry link permanently," the operator called out, pulling back hard on the control stick. The crawler's rear treads dug into the smooth floor, grinding backward out of the circular platform's perimeter. The moment the front treads cleared the warping field, the visual distortion snapped back to normal. But the physical metal on the front bumper showed severe, strange alterations. The high-grade steel was completely cold to the touch, and its molecular surface had taken on the same vitrified, glass-like sheen seen on the walls of the entry tunnel. The team knew they couldn't risk driving deeper into the vault without knowing what triggered the activation sequence. They needed to understand the energy source driving the cylinder. Using the crawler's rear-mounted directional radar array, the operator angled the sensor upward, scanning through the ceiling of the octagonal dome directly above the suspended metallic structure. The radar waves penetrated 40 feet through the dense ceiling rock, before hitting a second, higher subterranean layer. The resulting cross-sectional render lit up the command center screens in vivid red and gold contours. The dome didn't terminate in solid rock. Positioned directly above the vault, completely encased inside the central core of the Mesa, it was a massive lenticular void, a saucer-shaped chamber over 200 feet in diameter. Sitting dead center inside that upper chamber was an immense high-density object, composed of layered, non-terrestrial metallic alloys, resting on a bed of pulverized quartz sand. The suspended cylinder in the lower vault was merely a conductor, an energy conduit extending downward from the massive object, trapped inside the heart of the Mesa. "That's the core," Travis whispered, staring at the synthetic aperture radar outline on his monitor. The entire Mesa was artificially built around that central mass. It's an underground facility designed to house, power, or contain whatever is sitting in that upper room. As the realization washed over the team, a loud horn blasted from the security post outside the Mesa entrance. Field Superintendent Thomas Winterton's voice crackled over the radio, laced with sharp urgency. "Command, you need to step outside and look at the sky directly over the Mesa. Right now." Travis, Erik, and the field crew threw open the doors of the command truck and stepped out into the desert air. The clear afternoon sky directly above the plateau was no longer blue. Directly over the GPS coordinates of the underground vault, the air had developed a visible, shimmering circular lens, a massive atmospheric distortion 300 yards wide, completely swirling the sunlight overhead, while a blinding column-shaped beam of invisible ultraviolet energy shot straight out of the top of the Mesa into the upper atmosphere. The atmospheric column didn't show up on standard optical cameras, but on the team's localized infrared and ultraviolet sensors, it looked like a solid pillar of thermal energy, piercing directly through the troposphere. The atmospheric refraction index is off the charts, Dr. Travis Taylor said, adjusting the filters on the ultraviolet tracking unit. Whatever powered up inside that octagonal vault isn't just venting cold air. It's dumping immense amounts of directed ion kinetic energy straight into the upper atmosphere. That pillar is creating a localized thermal inversion layer, 3,000 feet up. Back inside the command truck, the electronic monitoring equipment started picking up cascading anomalies from across the entire 512-acre property. The perimeter sensors at Homestead 1, over a mile away from the Mesa, began recording rapid unexplainable temperature drops, plunging from 85 degrees Fahrenheit down to below, freezing in less than 2 minutes. Simultaneously at the Triangle area, the radio spectrum analyzers registered a secondary ultra-high frequency blast that locked onto the exact same 1.6 GHz frequency, vibrating in direct synchronization with the acoustic hum coming from inside the subterranean vault. It's a network resonance, Erik Bard explained, tracking the live data streams on the master map. The central hub beneath the Mesa just sent an activation pulse down those 6 radial channels we mapped earlier. Every anomaly site on this ranch is tied to that central subterranean mass. When the core powers up, the whole ranch turns into a single, massive antenna array. Down inside the octagonal room, the crawler's sensors were still transmitting vital physical data through the armored, fiber optic tether. With the vertical beam of light still hovering over the central circular platform, the team decided to use the crawler's mechanical arm to deploy a specialized micro-drone, a tiny, heavily shielded multi-rotor drone designed to fly short distances in high-interference environments. The micro-drone unlocked from the crawler's chassis, its carbon fiber rotors whirring as it lifted off into the frigid, pressurized air of the vault. It rose slowly, avoiding the central light beam, and angled its camera upward toward the apex of the dome, directly targeting the structural join where the suspended metallic cylinder emerged from the stone ceiling. As the drone's high-intensity spotlight illuminated the junction point, the team saw a series of complex, interlocking gear-like mechanisms made from the same non-oxidizing, dark metallic composite. But these were not crude mechanical gears. They were seamless, fluid components operating without visible lubricants, metal-on-metal friction, or mechanical noise. The mechanism was slowly rotating, precise micro-degree at a time, adjusting the pitch and alignment of the cylinder pointed at the platform below. It's auto-aligning, Travis noted, staring at the mechanical housing on the high-definition feed. It's calibrating its axis. But what is it pointing at? The drone operator nudged the flight controls, directing the craft higher through the narrow access ring around the cylinder, attempting to pass through the ceiling gap and glimpse the lenticular upper chamber where the massive 200-foot object was buried. As the drone cleared the ceiling threshold and entered the lower margin of the upper chamber, its video stream flickered, capturing a brief, stunning 2-second sequence. The chamber was not filled with dirt or fallen rock. The massive, saucer-shaped object resting inside was completely suspended within a dense, shimmering cloud of levitating quartz crystals, thousands of translucent, jagged mineral fragments floating motionless in zero gravity around the metallic hull. The hull itself was covered in glowing geometric micronodes that pulsed with a soft, amber light. Before the drone could stabilize its position to capture a full wide-angle view of the object's hull, an intense electromagnetic shockwave rippled through the upper chamber. The drone's internal gyroscopes failed instantly, and the stream cut out. Down in the command center, every piece of digital telemetry went black at once. But instead of total silence, the radio receiver on the main console burst to life, broadcasting a continuous metallic audio pattern that wasn't coming from the crawler, the drone, or the sky. It was being generated directly inside the electronics of the command truck itself, modulating the speakers to project a structured sequence of tones that formed a mathematically precise countdown. The rhythmic sequence echoing through the command truck's speakers wasn't a standard radio signal riding an external carrier wave. It was an inductive audio signal, forcing the copper voice coils inside the monitors to vibrate without an active audio file playing on the system. "Shut down the master server feeds," Erik Bard called out, reaching for the primary breaker switch. "It's driving current directly through our audio hardware." As Erik threw the main breaker, killing the central server racks, the tone didn't stop. It shifted in frequency, lowering into a dense mechanical thrum that vibrated the metal walls of the command trailer. On the dark, unpowered backup screens, faint phosphorescent residual static began forming geometric, mathematically lined patterns, a visual representation of the acoustic waveform saturating the room. Outside, the environmental sensors scattered along the perimeter of the mesa recorded a massive, localized magnetic pulse. The earth surrounding the fissure didn't cave in. Instead, the subterranean pressure that had been forcing sub-zero air out of the tunnel mouth suddenly inverted. A powerful vacuum draft began pulling air into the opening at over 40 miles per hour, whistling violently as it rushed past the vitrified sandstone walls and down into the octagonal vault. The airflow flipped, Thomas Winterton shouted into his radio from the entry trench, bracing himself against a safety line anchored to the excavator. It's drawing atmospheric air straight into the lower chamber. We're seeing a massive barometric plunge at the threshold. Inside the vault, the crawler, still anchored by its armored fiber optic tether, captured the immediate physical aftermath of the vacuum event. The suspended metallic cylinder hanging from the apex of the dome ceased its rotational alignment. The violet light beam that had been slicing down toward the circular platform vanished. In its place, the dark, non-reflective composited platform at the center of the room began to slowly lower into the floor, sinking on three massive, hydraulic-like stone pillars that descended smoothly into an illuminated subterranean shaft beneath the vault floor. As the platform dropped 10 feet below the vault floor, the crawler's surviving wide-angle lens revealed what lay underneath the central complex. It was an immense, subterranean conduit network that extended far beneath the level of the Uinta Basin shale layers. A deep earth transit or energy transmission channel lined with pristine, polished metallic ribs that stretched in a straight, unbroken line toward the horizon. And resting inside that deep channel, directly beneath the lowering platform, was a series of massive crystalline storage matrices, glowing with a deep, steady blue luminescence that illuminated the subterranean conduit for hundreds of yards in either direction. "That's not an installation built to stay hidden forever," Dr. Travis Taylor said, staring at the raw visual feed coming off the crawler's local storage buffer. "That's a dormant power grid that was waiting for a specific surface trigger to complete a circuit. Every time we fire radar waves, drill into the rock, or send electrical current down into that mesa, we aren't just observing the property, flipping the switches." The mathematical correlation was undeniable. The 1.6 gigahertz frequency, the localized radiation spikes, the thermal inversions, and the gravity anomalies weren't random, paranormal events. They were the active functional waste heat and telemetry signatures of a subterranean system adjusting its internal power load. Suddenly, the continuous vacuum draft at the tunnel mouth stabilized. The deep earth hum smoothed into a faint high-frequency whisper that settled over the mesa. On the crawler's main display, the circular platform came to a complete rest at the base of the lower transit channel. The glowing blue crystalline matrices along the conduit floor shifted from a steady light into a slow, rhythmic pulse, a signal pattern matching the exact intervals of the atmospheric data packets tracked above the ranch for decades. The central hub was fully initialized. The subterranean network connecting the triangle, the mesa, and the surrounding ridgelines was no longer dormant. The team realized that for the first time in the history of Skinwalker Ranch, they were no longer looking at unexplained surface phenomena. They were standing at the threshold of an active, engineered, planetary-scale infrastructure buried beneath the desert floor, and the system was preparing for its next phase. The slow, rhythmic blue pulse traveling down the deep earth conduit didn't fade. It stabilized into a continuous, low-amplitude energy loop, a steady, functional idle state that brought the chaotic surface disruptions to an abrupt, eerie halt. Outside the mesa, the localized thermal inversion layer collapsed back into the ambient desert atmosphere. The 1.6 gigahertz radio frequency bursts dissolved into standard background noise, and the ambient radiation levels around the fissure drop-off returned to baseline within minutes. But on the monitors inside the command truck, the structural map of Skinwalker Ranch had been permanently altered. The data gathered by the Subterranean crawler, the microdrone, and the deep-tier ground-penetrating radar arrays yielded a definitive physical conclusion. The 512-acre property is not merely a hotspot for transient, unexplained aerial phenomena or random localized lake electromagnetic anomalies. The entire basin is anchored to an ultra-dense, subterranean technological infrastructure. The vitrified sandstone tunnels, the octagonal distribution vault, the suspended cylinder, and the massive saucer-shaped core buried 200 feet inside the solid rock shell of the mesa form a single integrated machine, a system engineered with precise mathematical geometry, exotic materials like helium-3, and physics-defying gravitational containment fields. The historical mystery of Skinwalker Ranch, the strange lights, the sudden medical incidents, the equipment failures, and the erratic radar hits, was never a series of disconnected hauntings or random cosmic events. They were the external, operational telemetry of a buried facility, reacting to human intrusion, adjusting its power distribution whenever surface activity touched its underlying network. Yet as the central hub settled into its steady power cycle, the primary question expanded into something far greater. Who constructed an underground, vitrified distribution network beneath the hard stone of northeastern Utah? Is it an ancient, long-dormant planetary monitoring station left behind by an advanced intelligence, or an active transit hub operating on a scale humanity is only beginning to comprehend? Every major discovery inside the Mesa has opened the door to a vastly deeper reality. The physical evidence is no longer hidden beneath layers of fallen rock and decades of speculation. It is sitting in the raw telemetry, mapped in 3D point clouds, captured in high-definition video buffers, and etched into the melted sandstone walls beneath the surface. The mystery of Skinwalker Ranch isn't just real, it is operational, highly intelligent, and waiting deep beneath the earth. Now, we want to hear from you. When you look at the geometric symmetry of the subterranean vault, the presence of rare helium-3, and the deliberate alignment with the 1.6 GHz signals captured in the sky, what do you think is sitting inside the core of the Mesa? Is this evidence of an ancient, non-human infrastructure buried beneath North America, or an active gateway connecting our world to something far beyond it? Drop your theories and scientific breakdowns in the comments below. We read through them and love seeing how this community analyzes the data. If you found this deep dive investigation gripping, hit that like button, share the video with fellow mystery enthusiasts, and make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss our next major breakthrough script on unexplained phenomena and deep earth discoveries. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next investigation.